Our next inductee is the late Julian Nott. And to say a few words for Julian, are two of his compadres that have done a lot of work and flown a lot with him. First is Alan Eustace. Alan is retired Senior Vice President of Knowledge, and he retired in 2015 after 13 years with Google. He's held various positions, including the VP of Engineering from 2005 to 2011. The interesting thing is his last 3 years at Google, his side project was to work with the world-class Strat EXT to design, build, and test this food-like system that ended up setting 3 new skydiving world records. From the highest exit altitude, which I believe Alan did, the highest exit altitude, he holds a world record at 135,899 feet. But I think they shortened that up. They didn't get all that 135,000 in the record. And prior to Google, Alan spent time with digital company, HP, just one of the smartest guys I've ever had the honor to introduce, Mr. Alan Eustace.
So thank you for being here. Julian obviously isn't here to be able to accept this, so I thought to myself, what would Julian do if he was here? And one thing Julian would do is he'd be wearing this suit, even though like it's 1,000,000 degrees out and stuff like that, because his background was a proper English gentleman, and he would feel like it was his duty to do that. He would have a huge smile on his face, you know, just like I do right now, because he'd be so proud that his fellow balloonists recognized him. And he'd be giddy with excitement, you know, and he'd want to tell you all about all of his projects that are going on, because he always had like 15 projects at any given time. I think he would thank, the first thing I know he would do is thank Ann Luther, his partner of 30 years. She's an amazing woman. They couldn't be more different. You know, she was a very accomplished businesswoman and artist, and he was a balloonist, adventurer, and explorer. And but somehow that partnership worked for 30 years, and it's just amazing. And she'd be here holding his hand, I'm sure. He'd want to thank the Brotherhood of Pilots, you know, that he was honestly thrilled to be among. He was inducted into the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. I think the first and maybe the only balloonist ever to do that. And he loved pilots. He loved pilot stories. He could tell pilot stories. He'd listen to pilot stories forever. And it's an amazing brotherhood. Then I think if Julian was here, what he would do is try to cram 50 years of ballooning into the shortest possible time. He wouldn't succeed, but he would talk really, really fast. And I'm not really capable of talking at this speed, especially with this British accent. So I'll skip that part. But I do want to kind of summarize what I think of Julian. There's an Arthur C. Clarke quote, and I'll just read it here. When a distinguished but elderly scientist tells you something is possible, he is almost certainly right. When he states that something is impossible, he is almost certainly wrong. And that kind of summarized Julian. You know, what everybody else had done was just basically fodder in his imagination for what could be done. Every project from the, you know, trying to figure out whether you can build a balloon from prehistoric things to whether you can fly a balloon on Venus and then proving it's possible to do that, or all these things. I mean, that was in his heart. I mean, he loved exploration. I met Julian because I had an idea that was kind of crazy to build a scuba-like system and be able to use a balloon to take me up to 135,000 feet, break the world record for skydiving. And I had asked 5 different people in 5 different walks of life who is the ballooning expert I should go to. And they all pointed me to Julian Nott. So I got on a plane and I went down to Santa Barbara and met Julian for the very first time. The first thing he says is, you know, people have asked me to do this for them, you know, every year for the past, you know, like 15 years. And I've said no to all of them. And but it gets a big smile on his face and said, but I like the idea you're trying to do something different, that people aren't possible. So the easiest way to get Julian to do something was say, well, I'm thinking about an idea, but it's impossible, because he would latch right onto it. And he did all the balloon work for us. He was responsible. He used to tell me over and over that he stayed up at night worrying about things so that I didn't have to. And obviously we were successful in 2014. I rode a balloon up to 135,000 feet, got a beautiful view of the world in a custom-built spacesuit, and then skydived back down, and Julian was there on the ground for me, and with the biggest grin on his face. It was like he had set the record himself. And it's kind of cool that my spacesuit is in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and right across from it, I don't think coincidentally, because Tom Crouch was the connection, but is his capsule that he used to set the high balloon record of 55,000 feet. And we have pictures above us, next to both of those different displays. It was an amazing thing. In 1998, he had an idea for a cryogenic balloon. Something that could basically set duration records aloft. Because, every night you come down and you have to put out sand. But what happens if you could replenish the vented, helium or lithium gases? And he filed a patent and was awarded in 1998. And his life dream was to pursue it. And just before he died, he flew a balloon to test those kind of theories. And he'd be extremely proud of that accomplishment. On the side of that capsule were three words that I think best summarize Julian to me, which was adventure, exploration, and science. And those are the three things that I think best summarize, my friend, Julian Nott. I'm sorry he's not here today, but to the extent possible, I feel like his spirit is definitely here. And now I want to introduce Peter Cunha, who flew on some of those flights with him, to say a few words.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm not sure there's a whole lot I can add to what Alan said. I do feel that everyone who's being inducted here today had something very special to give to ballooning, and sometimes it's hard to differentiate between the individuals, but Julian was a unique individual. His background was not one that you would have expected him to end up in ballooning. His father was a World War II distinguished participant, if you want to call it that, as well as a company director. His younger brother became a high-profile solicitor, which is the fancy British word for lawyer. And Julian grew up, as Alan said, in a very proper British family. I don't think that anyone would have forecast his career from his initial upbringing. But he was not a charlatan. He had a master's degree in physical chemistry from Oxford University, one of the best universities in the world. He knew what he was talking about. He just chose ballooning as his passion in life, and he stayed with that passion his whole life. Very few people that I have known in my lifetime have stayed with a single passion for more than 70 years. I think that was one of the things that made Julian unique. And he was also very early in the ballooning world. One example of some things he did early, much before I knew him, I met him in the late 80s, early 90s. But in 1972, he was one of two balloons that flew across the Sahara in Africa when he was 27 years old. There's a book called Daffodil and Golden Eagle, written by Jonathan Yeatman, that describes that adventure. 27 years old, he was already flying balloons across Africa. It was something that he knew he wanted to do, and he just did it. Alan mentioned the fact that he has widely very experienced in ballooning. He had a contract with JPL Labs in California to design a balloon that could possibly fly on the moon Titan, which is the moon of Jupiter, because there were certain advantages that only Julian could understand to flying a balloon instead of flying a powered aircraft there. And he built a simulator for the atmosphere of Titan, and he showed it to me, and it was full of liquid nitrogen, and it was a big, huge box, and it just didn't look like Titan, but it worked like Titan. So that was Julian's way of doing things. Many, many record flights. I really encourage everyone to delve into his biography here. One flight that he was particularly proud of, that Alan also mentioned, happened in 1980 out of Denver. It was sponsored by IC Innovations, and it allowed Julian to recapture a hot air altitude flight that he had originally owned and it had been exceeded. Not sure who exceeded, but he won it back again. And as it was at 55,134 feet MSL. And this is the flight that used the pressurized capsule that is now in the Smithsonian, kind of repeating some of the things that Alan was saying. So another thing that I think is telling about Julian is the fact that even though he grew up in an environment in Great Britain, that he adopted the U.S. as his home country. He made the statement to me that when he decided to immigrate, he wanted to live and work where people were valued for their achievements rather than for their lineage. And he was very proud of the fact that he did achieve his U.S. citizenship. And I wasn't there, but I hear there was one hell of a party at his house the day after he got his citizenship. These were the kind of things that meant something to Julian. He was a person who stood on principle and would debate with you politics and world situation as well as ballooning. For me personally, my memory of Julian, and I did get to fly over the Nazca lines in Peru with him. I did get to fly in the 1998 first cryogenic flight out of Otis, Kansas, where we landed outside of Joplin, Missouri. Both just really unique memories for me, and perhaps they help bring forward some of Julian's projects a little bit. But the thing about Julian that I really appreciated was his willingness to share his knowledge with anyone who had a sincere interest in his subject matter. He was just totally enthusiastic. You didn't have to come to him with a whole bunch of gold-plated credentials. He could intuitively know when someone had an honest interest and an ability to understand the subject matter. He would give extemporaneous lectures at a moment's notice, and he would just talk your ear off, but it was all good stuff. He always had a notebook in hand, and he would whip out these handwritten drawings to explain what he was talking about, complete with equations and symbols. And on a very personal basis, aside from all of his records, he was a person that was just infectious. I didn't know him when he was studying most of his records in the 70s and the 80s, and I often wondered why he didn't sit back on his laurels and just enjoy his past records. But that just was not Julian. That was not the way he functioned. He always had tomorrow's project on his plate today, and to the day he died, he still had big plans. I'm sure that he would be very happy to know that he was inducted today, very well-deserved induction, the BFA Hall of Fame, and in a way, I do feel that he is still with us in spirit. He certainly has informed my interest in ballooning and my approach, and I just say, please take a look through all the stuff. He was a unique individual. In some ways, he could have been a bit difficult to deal with for some folks, but his heart was in the right place. So thank you very much.